Hello, it is October 22nd, 2023. My name is George Whitten, the founder and editor of Worthy News. The title of this episode is The Simchat Torah War. I'm going to answer a bunch of questions that have been submitted. So the first question is, how do I think this war will end prophetically? Well, first I would go ahead and suggest watching the first part of this series, the Simchat Torah War. Is this a water-breaking moment? I believe that's what's going to happen spiritually. I think there's going to be a huge move of God in this. I go through that and I talk about the history. Another thing I think is going to happen is that we're going to see basically a rise of anti-Semitism. So much so that we're going to see the fulfillment of this passage in Jeremiah where God says he's going to send forth many hunters and drive Israel back home. I think we're in the process of that. The next thing I think is that we're probably going to see some sort of move toward a new world currency. If you have a major war in the Middle East, then what's going to happen is the price of oil is going to go straight up. The price of oil goes straight up. You have economic crises all over, and you already have now economic crises. This week, the European Bank announced it's moving toward the digital euro. And I think we're going to start seeing this transition. It's not the mark of the beast yet, but it is the framework for the mark of the beast that no one could buy or sell unless they have the mark. And so I do see this being pushed or continue to go toward that. The next question, can I ask you a question about your second video on the Simchat Torah War? Why do you think God will destroy Shi'ite Islam? I thought all of Islam was deception. So in that particular war, I went ahead, or in that particular video, I talked about how I believe that God was actually going to deal with Shi'ite Islam. And to understand the difference between Shi'ite Islam and Sunni Islam, I suggest watching this war, the War and Rumors of War, Yemen, and is this the end of endless wars? In that, I go ahead and talk about the difference between Shiite Islam and Sunni Islam. And I believe that in order to facilitate what I call the Daniel 11 war, is that Islam is unified. Right now, there's huge divisions between Shiites and Sunnis, and I suggest watching that video to get an answer. The second question, or the third question, do you know about how Hamas attacked Israel? How this was pre-planned 75 years ago? Well, quite frankly, I realize there's a lot of people really focused on trying to, Israel is part of the New World Order. This is facilitating. I know that there's the whole Masonic, plan. I've read everything, but here's the reality. The reality is that we can't stop what God already said. God already said there was a new world war coming. God already said that these things were happening. We have to make sure that we keep our head on the game. I mean, the reality is that God has commanded us to pray for the peace of Jerusalem. God has commanded us to, pray for the salvation of because God's doing a work in every nation, tribe, and tongue. So that we have a purpose here. And our purpose isn't to try to stop the new world order. How can you stop it? It's already prophetically planned. Prophetically in motion. So right now, what the understanding of what's happening should activate us into fulfilling our calling in this day and hour. And what is our calling? Well, our calling hasn't changed, to go and make disciples and to win souls. The next question, this one's going to be a little bit more detailed and a little harder to answer, but I'm going to answer. Where are the lost tribes of Israel? There's a whole legend of the lost 10 tribes of Israel. So let me answer this biblically. It's going to take a little time, but you have to go back to when Israel was a nation. And under Solomon, it was a unified country or unified nation. And in that time, there was a division after Solomon died between Rehoboam and Jeroboam. And in that time, when the split took place, right, Jeroboam went north. And when he went north, he actually set up an entire different kind of sacrificial system. So we read in 1 Kings 12, verse 26, if these people go up to offer sacrifices in the house of the Lord at Jerusalem, then the heart of this people will turn back to the Lord. So the first thing is, he says, I need to set up another spiritual, system, so that the tribes that have gone north with me will not abandon me. And the next thing he's concerned about, and that they will kill me. So he's really concerned about his life. The irony is, so he's asking for advice, and they said, make 2 calves of gold. This is just being repeated. This is the same sin that Aaron had. Aaron, fear of death because they didn't know where Moses was. He went ahead and capitulated and made golden calves. Now, here it is. Everything's changed. Here's Jeroboam. He's worried about death. What can we do? Well, let's set up golden calf worship. Nothing changes. It's repeated all over again. And then he says to them, just like Aaron did. Aaron, when he made the golden calf, is the same thing to Jeremiah. Here are your gods, O Israel, which brought you up from the land of Egypt. And he set one at Bethel. Bethel was the most southern part of the kingdom of Israel at that time, and Dan, which is the most northern part of the kingdom of Israel at that time. And we continue on. And this thing became a sin, for the people went to worship before the one as in Dan. Now notice this. He made shrines in the high places. So he made places of worship in all the different high places. And what else did he do? He ordained a feast on the 15th day of the 8th month. There are no biblical feasts. There are no God-ordained feasts in the 8th month. So he created this. He installed this. Why? Read at the very end. Well, in verse 33, he devised this in his own heart. The next thing you read is that he went ahead and he installed priests at all the high places that he created. So now he set up a priest system. Now he also sets up the sacrifices on the altar, and it burns incense. Continue on, and you read what happened was that when he went up to set up his own priesthood, that this actually caused the Levites to leave. They were forced to leave all the tribes up north. Now, you have to understand that the Levites did not have any territory per se. They were actually called to be the priests to all the tribes in Israel. So now what happened is, because he says in verse 15, he appointed for himself priests to the high places. Notice this, for the demons. He called this false worship demonic worship. So the Levites left, and when they left, they were forced down south. In verse 16, those of all the tribes of Israel, such as to set the heart to seek the Lord God of Israel, came to Jerusalem to sacrifice the Lord God of their fathers, and so they strengthened the kingdom of Judah. So what you had was tribes up north that could not and would not, they didn't want to worship the false worship. They wanted to worship the God that delivered them out of Israel. Delivered them out of Egypt. And so they came to Jerusalem. And notice they strengthened. So you had remnants of all the tribes of Israel that didn't want us to worship wrong, and they came south. So that's one thing you have to understand, that at that time, even at the very beginning of the division of the nations, the kingdom of Judah actually incorporated all the tribes already. That's the 2 Chronicles 11. Continue reading on. Now, this is 2 Chronicles 15, so I've jumped a little bit in the timeline. If you read 2 Chronicles 13, you'll read that Aviah actually had a war with Jeroboam. And in this war with Rehoboam, Jeroboam. Anyway, it doesn't matter. There was a major war. In this war, there was a lot of people that died. And when Aviah, had this war, a lot of people died, and then his son Asa came to power. When Asa came, he says he took courage. Now, in this war, there was some areas that were taken that were part of the kingdom of Israel, and he went ahead and destroyed. He went through, and he was restoring the worship. Notice this, that when he went ahead and did this and destroyed the idol worship and destroyed all these things, that those who dwelt from Ephraim, Manasseh, and Simeon, they came over to him in great numbers from Israel. So guess what? You had Ephraim, which was the most southern tribe area that was part of the kingdom of Israel, and Manasseh, which is the most northern tribe of Israel. Now you have basically another immigration of the quote unquote the lost 10 tribes, or the 10 tribes coming now over. Why? Because they saw that God was with the kingdom of Judah. They didn't want to worship the false gods. Next, you continue reading in this. Now we're jumping much further along in the timeline, but now this is in 2 Chronicles 30. And so Hezekiah now sends to all of Israel and Judah. So now he's sending to all the tribes that they should come to the house of the Lord in Jerusalem. And so they made a proclamation from the southernmost major city, Beersheba, all the way to Dan, the most northern part. And they sent out this command: children of Israel, return to the Lord your God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. Then he will return to the remnant of you, which have escaped from the hands of the kings of Syria. So I'll talk a little bit about that, about this Syrian situation, because that's where the myth of the lost 10 tribes comes from. So you continue reading, and so they went through city to city. They went all the way through from the most southern part of the kingdom of Israel all the way to the most northern part, from Ephraim to Manasseh, and all the way to Zebulun, all the way to the most western part. And nevertheless, right, those that came from Asher, Manasseh, Zebulun humbled themselves and came over, for a multitude of the people, many from Ephraim, Manasseh, Issachar, and Zebulun, they came over to celebrate Passover. They hadn't celebrated in a long, long time, so God went ahead and through Hezekiah allowed them to come and worship. Now we continue on. So there's a huge movement of people from that time that also came over to Israel. So where did the lost 10 tribes come from? Well, you have to understand that all the tribes of the northern kingdom, and remember, we're already talking about there's a remnant of all the tribes already in Judah and in the kingdom of Judah, in the southern kingdom. There's already all the tribes there. But now, here's the final destruction of the kingdom of Israel. So, in the days of Assyria, the emperor or the rulers of Assyria, they were the major terrorists. They ruled with terror. They ruled with fear. They had an empire all the way from Egypt all the way to near India. And they came up with an ingenious plan. They made sure that no one area had too much of a concentration of a group of people that could lead a rebellion. So they literally would take entire nations and divide nations and move people and scatter people so that within one area there wasn't an ability to concentrate a rebellion. So we read here in 2 Kings 15 that he was taking these different cities and he carried them captive. Many went ahead and set up different towns inside of Syria. Many were sold as slaves. Again, we see another time in 2 Kings 17 that the king of Assyria then carried away, another group of people from Israel, and they left. Then we continue reading on. So it happened again in 2 Chronicles 17, because of the sins of Jeroboam. God went ahead and removed Israel, and now they're carried off into Assyria. Now, not everyone, because there was still a remnant that was still left in the northern kingdom of Israel. But many of those northern kingdom of Israel, at the time of the Assyrian dispersion, many of them came south. They already realized they were under judgment. They didn't want to be under. They wanted to worship God. So now you have this situation. Now continue on. Then we read this, that the king of Assyria brought from people from Babylon and from Cutha, Ava, Hamath, Seraphim. Anyway, so guess what? The same situation when the Assyrians took tribes out into the other nations, he now brings in other nations to Israel. So now he's bringing this whole group of people in, and so now the land is filled with all these idols. And you see this, they made gods in their own cities where they had settled, and they set them up in shrines of the people of Israel, and they made it these high places. So now these high places are full of all these pagan gods. So when the Lord comes, when Yeshua, where Jesus comes to the Galilee, he comes to a land where there's very few indigenous Jews. What had happened? The whole area was contaminated. It was quote unquote Samaria. There was still remnants of Jewish people, still had synagogues, but at the same time, what you had, well, the synagogues come back later. That's actually during the Babylonian return, but I'm confusing people. Forgive me. So anyway, a long story short, you have now a situation where these people that get dispersed by the Assyrians, they were picked up as entire people groups. Because they were picked up as entire people groups, now what happens is 2,000 years later, these people groups that were separated by the worship on Shabbat, they could only marry within their own tribes. That what happened was now 2,000 years later, when God goes ahead and calls them back home, that now they're coming back home. So now, as they come back home, they're coming back home. These are, quote unquote, the lost tribes scattered abroad. That's why James says to the 12 tribes scattered abroad. There was no hidden tribes. There's no hidden tribes hidden in there's a lot of really bad theology on this, and so to make this whole issue in a nutshell, God is called the Jewish people back home. He's actually talked about in Ezekiel 37 that he's making them one again. And that's what we're saying. And so there is no quote unquote lost tribes of Israel. Okay, so that's just it in a nutshell. Next question. Oh, I had a question. I forgot to put a slide up, but it's okay. So what should we do? It was one of the questions. Well, listen, I want you to understand that it's about the kingdom of God. And here was a parable that the Lord gave. And he said, this parable, why did he give this parable? Notice here in verse 11, because they thought the kingdom of God was going to appear immediately. For those of us that they anticipated the Lord's return, we're waiting for the Lord's return. He's going to come immediately. He's coming at any day. So what did he give the parable? He said, look, there was a certain nobleman who went to a far country to receive himself a kingdom and to return. So this is a picture of the Lord leaving, and he's coming back to return. At that time, he called 10 servants to himself, and he gave them 10 minas. Each had a mina. He said, do business till I come. And he continued to do this, and notice this. After he left, he came back. And he came to the first one and said, hey, what did you do with your mina? He said, I made 10 minas. He says, well, good. Well done. You're faithful in very little, so now I'm giving you authority over 10 cities. The next situation that happens is, hey, they come to the second one. He says, look, your mina, I made 5 more. He says, well done. You're going to give you 5 cities. The next one says, hey, here's your mina. I kept it in a handkerchief. And now he keeps it in his handkerchief, and now the Lord actually recompensed to him his reward. And notice this, what he says. The one that buried it is the one they had his mina taken away, and he gave it to the one that had 10. And they said, but master, he has 10 minas. And he said this, for I say to you that everyone who has will be given. From him who does not have, even what he has will be taken away from him. That there was no reward. Why? Because they buried it. Be very wary and very careful not to bury the treasure that God has given you. You have a treasure in earthen vessels. The Spirit of God's been given to you. Why? To go ahead and proclaim the King is coming, to proclaim the message of the gospel. We have to be entirely gospel focused. Look, the understanding prophecy was never meant to distract us from what we're called to do, and that's to go and make disciples of men. And if we have a end times theology that causes us to bunker up, that causes us to bury the treasure that God has given us, that causes us to go ahead and try to hide what God has already prophetically said is going to happen, then you're going to get that which you have taken away from you. I'm just telling you what the parable says. Right now, it's not time to cower. It's time to push forward. It's time to go ahead and say, hey, the King is coming. We have all this prophetic evidence. Everything is now in front of us. We have all the evidence. Let's keep the main thing the main thing. Okay. Next question. What ministries would you support to help Israel? Well, look, we support a lot of different ministries in the land, but because so many people are asking this question, we decided to set up a Worthy Ministries Israel Fund. So this fund that we just set up today, everything that comes in will go straight to Israel. We won't take anything from it. It'll just go straight. We want to be a blessing to the land. We want to see a lot of the messianic leaders that are pushing forward with the gospel receive the funding that they need. There's a lot of ministries that are in Israel that are not actively, for the salvation of Israel. We want to support those ministries that are actively for the salvation of Israel, and we want to support those believers in the land that have struggled. We just came across a guy whose apartment got hit in Ashkelon, and so when he got hit in Ashkelon, hey, look, he's going to need some financial help. So we want to be that ministry that helps. We're not taking anything. Now we're doing it only online. We're not, we're not going to be able to do checks this way. Right now, my accountant is in the middle of craziness. Long story short, his house had a catastrophe happen to his house. Right now, he's actually living in a hotel. I don't want to put more on his plate than he needs. The next thing, are you live blogging anywhere? Yes, we are. We're on Telegram. Be on Telegram. Why? Telegram doesn't censor. I don't have to worry about the censorship from all the different other social media platforms. Telegram, everything's happening. We are able to post up videos. We're able to post up everything. Just sign up there. Next thing, if you do not get our Worthy Briefs, sign up for our Worthy Briefs. It's free. It starts out with a daily devotion, then goes through everything that happened in the news today. We send it out Monday through Friday. If you already get it, hey, would you do me a huge favor? Would you tell someone else? Let's spread the word. The reality is that we're being censored all over the place. In order for us to continue to reach people, it's going to have to be word of mouth. So would you be one of those guys? If you already get the word of me, would you tell someone else about it? Thank you so much for sitting and listening. It's a blessing to kind of just share with you my heart. It is a crazy time in Israel. We need to be praying for Israel. We need to be praying for the Jewish people. We need to be praying for the Palestinians. We need to be praying for the Arab people. We need to be praying for the salvation. And would you pray in the harvesters going into the harvest field? So until next time, this is George Whitten with Worthy News.